Oh hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster and we are back with season 4. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most earth-shattering shows to hit any runway in any part of the world in recent memory, Iris Van Herpen's Fall/Winter 2019 Couture show. Iris Van Herpen seems to be cut from a completely different cloth than anyone else in the fashion industry. She started her brand in 2007, she started showing in Paris in 2011, and in the 12 years that she's existed as a company, she's honestly accomplished more than most designers accomplish in their entire careers. Her whole brand seems to be focused on developing techniques that will take couture into the next level of its existence. Every season we hear about some crazy technique or method that she used to put some of the dresses together that honestly are a little difficult to understand sometimes. I was lucky enough to go see an exhibition of her work at the Howe Museum in Atlanta in 2015, and let me tell you, her work is insane up close. One of the most standout things that I remember from that exhibition was this quote that I'm going to paraphrase, where she said, "If something looks carefully handcrafted, we probably 3D printed it, and if something looks clearly artificial, we probably found a way to hand sew it." And these are not just gimmicks of process. Every single season we see more and more evidence that Iris Van Herpen might be the best designer currently living. If you watch this channel regularly, you know that I always encourage people to go watch the original runway show video for each collection before they actually dig into the analysis. It's an incredible, incredible runway video. This is definitely one where it's worth hooking it up to the flat screen and watching it for real. Just like how you should watch my videos. Oh, it is so nice to be back. I've missed doing this so much. All right. As far as my work is concerned, Iris Van Herpen is a goddess of generosity because she not only keeps all of her runway show notes on her website, but she also keeps an overarching artist statement that links all of her shows together on her website. There's just a couple of points really quickly that I want to talk about from her overarching artist statement and how it relates to this show. She says, "Within my designs, I search for symbiotic relationships exploring the hidden beauty at the intersection of precision and chaos." Symbiotic relationships are obviously relationships between two things that benefit both parties. And the hidden beauty at the intersection of precision and chaos is such a beautifully succinct way of describing her work. There's a lot of the dresses from this collection really look like elements that have just been floating around for thousands of years, and we happen to be witnessing the millisecond that they all clash together in the perfect way to form a gorgeous dress. And as soon as the show ends, they're all gonna fracture out again into a billion pieces. She also talks a good bit about biomimicry in design. Even if you're not familiar with the term, you've seen thousands of examples of biomimicry in design. Stuff like this armadillo backpack is biomimicry design. And stuff like this bird skull as a heel is biomimicry. Biomimicry is absolutely everywhere, even for stuff where it's not very blatantly obvious in the final product that it's biomimicry. The skin of reptiles, the curvature of trees, the feathers of different birds all get used in the mood boards that eventually become collections that get sold at stores. There's a way to argue that biomimicry is in literally everything that's man-made. But Iris is set apart from this kind of biomimicry because, in her words, "I look at the forces behind the forms in nature." And this collection is a beautifully crisp example of Iris examining the forces that shape nature rather than the shapes of nature themselves. To give you the full quote, "Through biomimicry, I look at the forces behind the forms in nature. These endless mysteries within nature create a huge influence on my work. Seeing water move, for example, shows me that nature is the most ingenious artist herself, and her metamorphoses are my muse to see the new forms of beauty and seduction, giving me inspiration to re-sculpt the female form." Words like that would not be perhaps so powerful if not immediately followed up by such gorgeous, brilliant work. So as far as show notes are concerned, we actually have 2 solid pages of show notes. And that's because there are 2 different kinds of notes that were given out. There was the actual official show notes, which are in the normal format of show notes, which is just paragraphs written about general inspiration and stuff. We are going to touch on that briefly, but we're going to try not to spend too much time on it because the other kind of show notes that Iris gave were individual notes on the specific dresses. The difference between the official show notes and the descriptions of the specific dresses was that these were not made available to the public, so you can thank me later. Let's start with the official show notes that are up on Iris Van Herpen's website. Hypnosis. For this collection, the designer found inspiration in the hypnotic manifolds within our ecologies through the work of American artist Anthony Howe. The three-dimensional cyclical harmony of Howe's kinetic sculptures is the wind beneath the wings of this collection. Howe's spherical Omniverse sculpture explores our relationship with nature and intertwines with infinite expansion and contraction, expressing a universal life cycle. The meditative movement of this Omniverse serves as a portal for the collection and the models, encircling a state of hypnosis. If you're not familiar with Anthony Howe's work, it's outstanding. I went on a bit of a rabbit hole while researching this episode, trying to track down videos of all of his wild sculptures. The idea for the vast majority of them is that they're being moved by wind and that they are creating this kind of hypnotic play on the idea of the circle. The most striking thing about his sculptures to me was that at most it would take 8 seconds for a full rotation of the thing to finish. But every time I would look at some of them, I would be in this state of anxiety about whether or not it was going to crash and like bend itself up. I know it fit last time, but it's not gonna this. Oh, it's okay. Whew, that was exhilarating. Oh shit, it's gonna crash. Oh, it was fine. Anthony Howe's work is incredibly sought after because he actually makes them all himself. The man is in his 60s, but from his home he makes digital mock-ups of potential sculptures that he wants to make, and then he 3D prints them himself, and then he assembles them, almost all of them, entirely by himself. And apparently when they started working together, Iris selected the Omniverse sculpture from a list of digital renderings that Anthony Howe had in his backlog. Apparently Van Herpen was compelled by the way that its arching vertebra, spinning on a curving axis, simultaneously expanded and contracted. So again, this kind of relates back to the way that all of these forces in nature are working together with their constant like ebbing and flowing and giving and taking. Anthony Howe is an artist where you won't find a whole lot of critical analysis on his work because stuff like that doesn't really fit into what he's doing. Howe is making sculptures that call to the carnal part of you that wants to sit and just watch a fire. All said, his work is a brilliant foil for Iris Van Herpen, whose work and process and symbolism we could talk about ad infinitum. And apparently both of them knew about each other before this collaboration even started, and they both were like secret admirers of the other's work. Back to the show notes. The collaboration with Howe evolves in an ecstasy of attentiveness through the symbiosis of all the elements of nature that are dependent on each other. As one of the key pieces of the collection, the final infinity dress comes alive in the breath of a finely balanced mechanism. An engineered skeleton of aluminum, stainless steel, and bearings is embroidered with a delicate layering of feathers in a cyclical flight, revolving around their own center, exploring the patterns and structures within its fragile landscape. Hypnosis reflects the beauty and complexity of our environment. There's such a beautiful phrase there, an ecstasy of attentiveness. Just from the perspective of good prose, it is so difficult to write about stuff like this without sounding like, oh, nature is just, like all of it is just, like, oh, fuck, like, look at my hand, how are hands like that? And again, I think it's important to remind everybody, she's not talking about, look at how gorgeous trees are. She's saying, look at all of the forces that are coming together so perfectly to build a tree. This next paragraph is just Iris Van Herpen's own words about the collection. Oftentimes designers get someone else to come in and write show notes for them, because they're not writers necessarily, they're clothing designers. But this here are the actual words from Iris about what she was trying to do. The Hypnosis collection is a hypnotic visualization of nature's tapestry, the symbiotic cycles of our biosphere that interweave the air, land, and oceans. It also reflects the ongoing dissection of the rhythms of life and resonates with the fragility within those interwoven worlds. The last paragraph goes into some details about the individual dresses but doesn't fully flesh them out, so instead of reading this last rather long paragraph, we're going to just go ahead and start talking about the individual dresses. So we'll start with the finale, the Infinity dress, the one that was a direct collaboration between Iris Van Herpen and Anthony Howe. The show note description reads, the Infinity dress is engineered by Anthony Howe and made in collaboration from an extremely fine mechanism of aluminum, stainless steel, and bearings to be hand-finished with layerings of feathers that fly cyclical around their own center infinitely. Hallucinatory motion reveals multiple perspectives of a single dress. The dress took 4 months of making and was engineered in 3ds Max and rendered with Octane, and then Fablite laser cut from stainless steel. Hundreds of wings were welded by hand with an Orion 12 jewelry welder to then be assembled to 4 curved axles that are casted into a fiberglass epoxy casted corset. Fine gears are attached to synchronize their rotation, and finally, the skeletal clockwork mechanism of the dress is embroidered with fine layers of white feathers to interact with the wind delicately. So usually Anthony Howe does not make objects that turn themselves with inner working gears. He's done that before, but obviously he prefers to make stuff that is pushed naturally by wind. Interesting note, the day before the show, this thing was not working correctly. Anthony Howe was working up until the last minute to try to get all of these gears synchronized so that they worked perfectly and moved fluidly. Couple of points of interest. First of all, I think it's awesome that both of these artists are so confident in their ability to be the best at what they do that they're happy to just tell you what software they use for everything. And in her ongoing exploration of the natural versus the artificial, Iris presents the final dress of a show that's supposed to be about the way that natural forces come together, and that final dress is run with an artificial mechanism. I don't think that casts any problems in the show, I just think it's incredibly interesting that we're able to explore this dichotomy so thoroughly. The Hypnosis dress is another really fascinating one that's also a collaboration. It's brought over from the Spring/Summer 17 Couture season. It's a collaboration with Philip Beesley, who's a multidisciplinary artist, architect, polymath guy. He's collaborated with Iris van Herpen a number of times, and it makes perfect sense why he would do that. If you look at their work independent of each other, it's like, why aren't those people working together? The description reads, "Thousands of cyclical seeds are laser cut from black foil and meticulously transferred by hand onto transparent mylar to then be laser cut in thousands of 0.8 millimeter fine waves that each are interlinked, dissecting the dress by each movement. The motion of walking creates a illusory distortion and retraction of the seeds that hover in full transparency onto the skin," in collaboration with Philip Beesley. It is such a beautiful concept for a seductive piece of clothing. Another piece that she shows in that same section of the collection is what's called the Poesis dress. The show notes for this dress read, "Abstract painting of warm terracotta shades gradient dyed on Duchesse satin to then be heat bonded to mylar and laser cut in thousands of 0.8 millimeter fine waves that each are interlinked, dissecting the dress by each movement. The movement creates a three-dimensional bubble effect and is designed to move faster than the eye can follow." Parts of that should sound familiar to the previous dress description that she made with Philip Beesley. What's really interesting here is that essentially the same technique seems to be used. What's different is that the Philip Beesley dress, thousands of cyclical seeds are laser cut from black foil transferred onto transparent mylar. Mylar is that material that emergency blankets are made out of. And then laser cut into thousands of 0.8 millimeter fine waves that are interlinked. Whereas for the Poesis dress, she takes that same concept and applies it to couture level materials. In the tradition of haute couture, this is the nicest material you can make a dress out of, is Duchesse satin. So we have gradient dyed Duchesse satin that's heat bonded to mylar again, and then laser cut into the 0.8 millimeter fine waves. And then for this dress, she highlights the bubbling effect that is definitely taking place with both of the dresses. So essentially the dress is like a slinky, right? If it's pushed together, it's completely opaque, you can't see through, it's a solid object. But as soon as it starts to move, it becomes transparent for a moment. Because as you're walking, you're only getting these little glimmers and flashes of skin very, very quickly. In the actual notes here, she uses the word dissect, but I think honestly a better term to use here would be deconstruct. Deconstruction is a philosophy term that means about as many things as there are things that it can be applied to. But in fashion, most commonly, deconstruction means that you're showing the inner workings of a garment on the outside of the garment instead of hiding them. So like pant fly zippers or the backs of seams, etc. Here we get a fascinating play on deconstructive clothing because the clothing is opening and closing itself up depending on the way that the user moves. And it's not only being transparent to show you that there's nothing particularly remarkable holding the garment together on the inside, but it is showing you the actual inner workings of the garment because human movement is actually what's making it transparent. So it shows you a little bit of skin. So poesis is a philosophy term that gets loosely used to mean people bringing something into existence that didn't exist previously. Here I think what Iris van Herpen is creating is she's taking this process that she and Philip Beesley developed multiple seasons ago, and she is fully realizing it in the world of couture with this gorgeous, gorgeous gown. Other dresses just have some really gorgeous details in them that are really easy to overlook if you just glance through the pictures really quickly. The Synthesis cape dress is a really good example of this. The show notes read, "Duchesse satin and transparent organza are oppositely gradient dyed from Shariro red into white and then heat bonded and laser cut into gradient sized waves. All of the dissected waves are heat pressed to the hundreds of transparent organza wave panels that are meticulously layered by hand and stitched to fine tulle, creating contrary color gradients. So first of all, like a number of other dresses in this show, you can see if you actually zoom in that there is a foundational part of the dress, and that's the fine tulle that they were talking about. It's basically completely transparent, but it forms the parts of the dress structurally that are necessary in order to keep the thing on the woman's body. All of the parts of the dress that are so striking and gorgeous are, as they say, meticulously hand sewn to that tulle layer. Driro is a traditional Japanese color that basically translates to vermilion red. It's really hard to get into the fine minutia of the difference between colors on computer screens, so we'll just say that it is somewhere between red and orange. Iris van Herpen really likes this color. And you can see that in the two major parts of the dresses, the waves and then the foundation of the dress, we have white starting here and we have red starting down here, and they slowly gradient into the opposite color as they move down and up. Especially in motion, this dress is gorgeous. Possibly my favorite section of the show features what's called the spheroid, the orbit, and the epicycle dresses. The process show notes between these are fairly similar and read, transparent organza hemispheres are multi-layered, forming larger spheres that weave into each other by fine black cyclic boning lines that are laser cut and heat bonded, fading the relationship between surface and substance. To quickly clarify a few of those concepts, a spheroid is a sphere but not perfectly a sphere. Basically, the Earth is a spheroid. Orbit is pretty self-explanatory. It's what, like, the moon does to the Earth. And an epicycle is a small circle whose center moves around the circumference of a larger circle. Another absolutely gorgeous set of pieces are the Suminagashi ink dresses. Again, this is another one where most of the descriptions are fairly similar. Suminagashi patterns from the ancient art of Japanese floating ink on water technique are gradient dyed fading white into burgundy to then be laser cut and heat bonded to transparent tulle, seemingly and seamlessly flowing down over the skin. These are more dresses where they're regularly having to use that transparent layer of tulle to actually form the structure of the dress so that they can then attach these really gorgeous decorations onto their body. These dresses especially demonstrate the amount of technical brilliance that Iris is able to bring into her collections. If we're being super honest, the idea of this floating ink on water stuff being applied as a fashion collection sounds like something that a freshman at an art school would come up with. It's like, yeah, that thing is pretty, but I don't feel like that needs to be applied to clothes, and also how are you going to do that without it just looking really tacky and try hard? But because Iris's atelier is able to support ongoing experimentation with technique and application, they can take pretty wild ideas like this and just let them absolutely soar, because they're able to go through an infinite number of iterations and attempts before they reach the absolute perfect, refined, crystallized idea. Because if you think about it, Iris van Herpen and her entire team had 6 months to work on 19 looks. By comparison, in the latter half of 2018, Balenciaga worked on 134 looks. Iris and her team have the luxury of time to be able to concept, design, work, rework, ad infinitum. And boy, can you see that in the final product. There is nothing slapdash about stuff like this. Finally, we come to my favorite dress, in that all of them are my favorite dresses, the Omniverse dress. Since we're already talking about huge planet-sized concepts in this show, she went a step further and references the Omniverse, which is all possible universes coexisting together. The description reads, white cotton is heat bonded to mylar and laser cut into thousands of 0.8 millimeter fine waves that each are interlinked, then stretched open into a double layered voluminous halo, creating illusionary wings of moire that hover around the body. So this is that same technique that we've seen at multiple other points in the show, that kind of slinky effect of as the person moves, the dress is able to move with it and kind of opens and closes. Except now we have that same technique spread fully open so we can examine its structure closely. This is a dress where Iris shows her hand a little bit and kind of gives us a little bit of a peek into the way that the garment is actually constructed, rather than giving us these little catches and hints of it as the dress moves. I like to think of her creating this specific dress with the thought of, copy if you can, dolls kill. And she points out very accurately that the visual effect that's given by this technique is very similar to the waves that you see in silk moire. Thank you once again for joining me. I am so excited to finally be back with you people. If you are not already following me on Instagram and Twitter, please do so immediately. Geez, this was such a fun episode to research and to find all of the materials for and to dig through all of the information about. If you want to see the individual dress description show notes, just hit me up on Instagram and I will be happy to forward them to you. If you're new to the channel, you should definitely check out all the other runway analysis videos that I've made. I've done one for Kiko and CDG and Rick Owens and Raph Simmons and a bunch of different people. If there's a specific show you want me to review, please mention it down in the comments. Sell me on it. Tell me why you love that show so much. And if anyone knows of any show notes for any shows that have ever been, please do not hesitate to hit me up and send them to me. Happy birthday, Zach. Bye.